Edition. Hello, and welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Outriders. But before we do that, buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, it's pretty simple. On this podcast, we like to talk about games, and I guess we've sort of picked up an affinity for these looter shooters, because today we're talking about Outriders, which is like the latest of them to try and snatch the crown and you know get people's attention.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a looter shooter, right? And we played a bunch of these, right? We both played a bunch of Destiny. We both played Anthem when it came out. Rip in pepperonis, Anthem. Uh,
Rest in peace, Anthem.
uh, yeah. So the game is I think it's probably closest to Anthem out of all. Did you ever play any of the Borderlands games?
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. It actually does remind me a lot of Borderlands. Actually, I had not even thought of it, but
because that's the other big looter shooter, right? The big ones in my mind are Destiny and Borderlands. It's kind of like the big entries in kind of
sure.
the genre.
There's
Um,
what else is there? There's the Division.
oh, that's
There's
true. Yeah.
maybe
Um,
that's the only other one I can think of.
yeah. Um, anyway, this one is by Square Enix, I believe.
Yes.
Uh, and it's got four classes. It's got a little bit more of kind of what I would call kind of the traditional tank healer damage trio, although I don't think it's particularly hardwired to it.
Yeah.
um but yeah, so you've played more than I have kind of come away from it basically being like, this is neat. I don't know how much time I'd put into it. Like I would play it with friends, but I hit the first, like, part of the reason why we kept delaying this podcast for so long is I would hit, like I just didn't like playing it by myself. I hit the first boss and I was like, I lost to it twice, kind of just from being sloppy. It's not like it's super hard, but like it popped me back to like the beginning of the fight. And I was just like, I don't care enough about this. I'm done. And I put it down until we played together. You've also met through that played two classes. I've played the Stony Boy, and you've played that and the Technomancer. You played a lot of Technomancer while we were playing together. We played for like 3 or 4 hours together, I want to say.
Yeah.
And it was captivating enough, but not so much that it drew me in. Um, at least, so do you have any thoughts before I start jumping into individual
My
aspects?
high level thoughts are I like I have a lot of likes and dislikes about like Outriders. Kind of for everything that I want to give it credit for, I also want to give it like I want to get on its case for sort of other things. But in general I do like it. If there is a looter shooter on the market right now that I would play, Outriders is probably it.
Hmm.
Maybe. Because I think I do like it more than Destiny, and I've never tried the Division, but my understanding is that I wouldn't like the Division just based on what I understand of it. But I probably like it worse than I enjoyed Anthem at the time, which, you know, is sort of faint praise because I never ended up playing any more of Anthem, obviously. But I had a much better time, I feel like, overall with Anthem, and I think Anthem was a product that was like more suited towards me than Outriders kind of ended up being.
Yeah, because part of the thing you liked about Anthem, and part of the thing that I think that Outriders shares DNA with is like high use of abilities and abilities being
Yeah.
super important, right? And I think Anthem, I think Anthem did a lot wrong, but I think it did kind of like that ability itemization well, right? Like, because you could equip basically other items in the slots. I think this is something that Outriders does interestingly, is kind of your armor has perks for your abilities, but also that doesn't seem super consistent to me, and like it doesn't seem consistent to me enough to like really build around it. Like, this is the thing that like bothers me the most, I think, about Outriders, is that um like there's two parts of it. There's the looter part and the shooter part, and something that and I don't think it does the looter part well enough. I don't think, and by the looter part I mean kind of like the action RPG build kind of defining kind of like itemization, tons of stuff, right? Like, I think it gets closer than a lot of other things. I think Borderlands also gets kind of close there. I think Borderlands actually does a little bit better. I haven't played enough of it. Something that I think it lacks is like I think Destiny, like if you know, on a scale from looter to shooter, I think Destiny's all the way on the shooter side.
Yeah.
And I think it does the shooting very well, which I don't think any of these other games have done well, right? Like I don't think the shooting in Borderlands or the shooting in this game or the shooting in Anthem felt particularly good. And that's, fine, right? Like you're allowed to, like you can focus on the loot more, but I don't think any of the looter shooters have really captured kind of that Diablo path of exile. Like this is really engaging. I want to kind of maximize the way I'm playing this game in a way that that feels really good and makes me want to keep like doing runs of things so that I generate more loot so I can like build out my character better. And that's kind of got to be the dark heart of all, right? Like, I think that's the promise of the genre, right? You get the addictiveness of the loot cycle, but you also get kind of like the um the feeling of the of the shooting. And honestly, maybe I'd even say that like right off of this band to the shootery side of the shooter that is Destiny, like maybe even on the spectrum is like something like Call of Duty, right? Where you have builds, right? But there's no variation, right? Like, or
Yeah.
there's no grind, or rather there's a grind for levels, but there's no grind for different pieces of loot that's luck based, right? It's
Or
all
gear, right? Like
yeah,
you're
yeah,
never gonna
no,
get a better gun than the gun that you unlock at the very first iteration of Call of Duty, right?
right. And but that's why I say it's only like a step to the right of Destiny, because Destiny, right, like for like the first 2 or 3 years of its existence, you were never getting a better devils than the better devils you got, right? Which is a big criticism of the game. And they finally introduced random rolls. But even still, that like those combinatorics are like very countable, right? Like there's like a couple different combinations you get on frames. Um, Unlike on the other like from the other perspective, right? Like Borderlands has always been like you can get 60 bajillion guns and they do like wacky things, and the tone of that game makes that like more like you can be a little bit more creative with it, right? Like I think it's like one of the I think it's torque guns. Like when you reload them, you throw the gun and it explodes, right? Like that's not appropriate for a more serious setting, but it lets you be a little bit more creative. And I think Borderlands kind of gets the looter part best out of any of these games.
I don't know. I do think the abilities in the loot stuff was good. Maybe part of it is that neither of us really hit the end game, right? Like, and in a certain sense, we're kind of talking about the game. Like imagine we're two WoW players and we talk about the loot cycle of WoW only for the leveling, like for leveling
Mm,
greens. You know what I mean? Like maybe we're not really like seeing that full picture. And I do sort of get that sense because as I played, because I got all the way to level 29, I beat the game, like I beat the campaign, but I didn't do anything after that. So I've picked up legendaries and I've redesigned my armor a couple of times because you can do that, to sort of like make stuff that you unlock, right? Like make that work. And I do see, and so I think the systems are there for this kind of customization. And it's a pretty similar send of customization to, like Anthem also had this where you had like legendaries that would sort of modify your gear. The thing that Outriders does is it puts that on rare armor, right? Like rare you get one modification, epic you get two modifications. Kind of thing. But I think that ultimately at the end of the day, first of all, it didn't feel incredibly balanced to me. There were some things where I was just like, who the fuck would take this? Like one of the abilities gave one of my moves like a bleed, and the other one increased its damage by 4,000. And it's like the bleed is gonna bleed for like 400 damage. One of these is 10 times as good as the other. How on earth would I ever take, like the bleed one? And you can make a number of arguments about that, right? Like, oh, there are talents that make like bleeds better and stuff like that or whatever. But I just didn't have the sense that it was like terribly well sort of like balanced. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it's like Magic where you need the bad cards to show players what the good cards are. Like part of the game is about deciphering what are the good cards or whatever.
so
Um,
just to remark on that really quickly, like I think that that's part of the part of the problem is like I don't think it needs to be balanced, right? Like this is there are options in like a Diablo. You'll pick up like a weapon that just like doesn't fit what you need, right? But you need to have enough of them and enough of like a playing field to build something unique out of it. Each class is like 8 skills, right? Like I don't think there's enough there, like uh to really like allow for like basically creative expression, right? Like you're kind of like, and like talent trees are like kind of like they're all like kind of like pinned to a couple of those abilities. You're kind of hemmed in there, I feel like, or at least that's the way it felt to me. And you can only like basically you don't have enough to really get the looter thing to, or the looter part of this to really sing for me, right? Like um Diablo 3, for all of its flaws, still had like had like at least like a like 20-ish abilities, I think, per person, with 5 different runes on them, right? So you've already got like 100 combinatorics there, plus like modifications from legendaries, and then like even the rares had like or had like stats in them that you were optimizing. That gives you enough to kind of like start to shape something that you can at least start to call your own. I think I've said this before, but I think part of the problem with Diablo is that set bonuses were too powerful, and so like you kind of got like locked into a particular build that wasn't particularly didn't allow for that kind of creative expression. I think that's a similar thing happening here. You don't have the set bonuses is the problem, but you just don't have enough playing field to kind of like
Yeah, I
work
definitely get
with.
that because of the talent trees. The talent
Yes.
trees modify certain abilities in different ways. Like so for instance, the abilities like earthquake, boulder dash, maybe um the tremors, right? Like a bunch of the abilities were keyed off of like anomaly power, and it was very clear that they were linked in that one bottom tier, right? Like that if you were going that bottom group, you had to take those abilities. You couldn't take some of the other abilities because they were more like reflect bullets doesn't interact with this stuff, right? Um, which was just like another kind of ability. I definitely feel you about there only being 8 abilities. This is something that I thought Anthem did much better, which was having like first of all, it had abilities that had kind of like a macro purpose, but also abilities that had like a micro purpose, if that makes sense. So you did have a lot of the combinatorics, right? So you had like I was making these kinds of decisions with my Anthem characters that were like, okay, I need a primer and I need a detonator because of the way that those mechanics work, right? So if I had the flamethrower, I set these guys on fire, and if I have the mortar, I can then shoot them with a mortar round, and the fire thing blows up. This comes from Mass Effect 3. This is a very cool ability, and I think it is a great foundation for like any of these looter shooter kind of like mechanically. But I never really had that sort of interaction with this game. At best, you would get like, I need to make things bleed because my other abilities key off of bleed. Like this thing is going to be do more damage to a bleeding target or whatever. But like the primer detonator gameplay is something that also existed with my group, right? Like I could run in with a build of full detonators and still rely on my allies to prime things for me to detonate, if that makes sense. And I just think that kind of like macro structure really helped Anthem a lot in a way that I wish that it was something similar was in Outriders. So I will say that I do think the some of the choices that you can make in Outriders are good, and you can kind of get to that point, right? Something that happened when I was playing with Rachel was we got to a part where we like opened up this courtyard and a ton of dogs, like the little dog monsters, like flooded in, and it was really hard. Partially because we were playing on the highest difficulty, and I do think the game scales faster than you are like reasonably able to deal with, and you probably have to scale it back at a certain point. Um, but so we were sitting there and we were just churning it over and over and over again. Something we were doing was going back to the base and like changing out our build until we eventually got to a place where like my build was refined enough for this individual fight that we could kind of like progress through it. And that's good. That is like I think that's evidence of good gameplay. I don't think I could do that in Destiny. I think that kind of iterative, tinkering with my build little piece by piece is really possible in Destiny because it's kind of set up to be more on the shooter side than the ability side, and that's fine and that's totally fair.
Sure.
But so I think that game does exist in Outriders, but in Outriders it's sort of buried under some of this other stuff. But I will say I did like the talent trees in general. I just kind of wish that the talent trees didn't have I liked a lot of the small effects of the talent trees that were not geared into the different abilities. Like there
Yeah,
were a
if
couple
they
of
didn't lock you down, right? Like I picked up
yeah.
a talent early on. It's like the one that's between the top and the middle tree. It's like your kinetic abilities like do a big bonus for you or something, right? Like, and it's like, well, that means I'm using earthquake and and whatever the other ones, and maybe I'm picking up one that doesn't fit into that group. But like, I mean, maybe that's even just that like you can there's 8 total and you can only use 3 of them, which I'm
Yep.
not which seems like nothing, right? Like I don't know. It
I don't know.
just
I'm okay with that. That was also the way the Mass Effect worked, and I think that that was fine, and that was a lot of that was fun, and I had plenty of fun,
sure, but like
paring down to just 3 abilities. But I don't really think that Outriders abilities. One of the other things that made it work in, I guess, Mass Effect was how easy it was to sort of like switch around. But if you were really going hard into firepower or really going hard into anomaly power, those were very rigid choices. You either went the build that was like, okay, using boulder dash or gravity, whatever, leap increases your firepower by 70%. Well, that's a firepower build. You don't have any option. The only way to do that is by going hard into firepower. And the other option is it just increases the damage of your whatever they were, like seismic abilities by 50%. What use is that talent except for to use earthquake and tremors or whatever? The talents that I thought were interesting were things like, when you kill a guy at close range, you steal 20% of his armor for 10 seconds, right? Like that, that it has no interaction with any of the other abilities, right? You can do that. You can shoot a guy at close range with a shotgun. You can kill a guy at close range with an earthquake. They will both feed into you. And those are the abilities that I kind of like wish were more spread out through the tree.
yeah, no, and I agree. And I just to your Mass Effect point, right? Like Mass Effect, it works, I think, at the smaller number of abilities because one, you've got 3 characters, right? Like it's you and your 2 wingmen, so you're doing you're making some more choices there. Also, the game isn't as much about like building out your character, right? First of all, I think the gameplay is better, frankly, and
Mm.
2, I like it's got a rich story, it's got better encounter design, a lot like Outriders is
It's got
basically
much better encounter design.
uh,
This is one of the big things that we'll talk about this in a second. Go ahead.
yeah, but no, like Outriders is the classic kind of literally like throw a ton of things at you and like do some minor mechanics, but most of it's just kind of like mow down hordes of things and and do minor mechanics, right? Like which is I actually don't think translates particularly well in the way that Outriders did it.
Yep,
I,
I think this is Outrider's biggest failing, and the part that makes me place it below something like Anthem or like Mass Effect. Or Andromeda is also kind of like this. One of the things that the Mass Effect games do, Anthem also does this, is that there are different kinds of enemy health, right? So you can have armor, you can have shields, you can have just regular like flat HP or whatever. And attacking a guy who has armor is different, significantly different than attacking a guy who has shields because of the way those things sort of like interact. This is also sort of true for like Overwatch. I mean, like this is not a unique to Mass Effect or BioWare games. Sort of thing. And I feel like just that small change has a ton of huge effects because it constantly makes me reevaluate what I'm using to engage my opponents with because I'm like, okay, well, if they're all armor, right? And armor does a thing where it subtracts damage per hit, right? So if I attack a guy with a submachine gun and he has armor, I'm plinking off. I'm not doing any damage, right? But if I attack a guy who has armor with a sniper rifle, I'm going to do great because it's one bullet that packs a ton of damage and it's just going to subtract, 3 from that or whatever. Shields are sort of the opposite though, right? Like shields reduce damage um by the set amount, but it won't penetrate through. So if you snipe a guy and you snipe his shields out, you're actually wasting a bunch of damage. Whereas the submachine gun will chew through the shields and then start chewing through the health because as soon as the shield runs out, right, like all of the subsequent bullets will then just hit HP or whatever. And I like that a lot. I think that's a great way to sort of incentivize players playing around those, you know, uh those effects and tailoring builds or tailoring the way that people approach encounters in that way, right? Like maybe I carry a submachine gun because I know that my abilities are good against armor but bad against shields, or I carry a sniper rifle and vice versa or something like that to kind of create like a holistic build. At the end of the day, the encounter design of Outriders is just, here's a room. There's an ammo box in the front. Every time you see an ammo box, you know that there's going to be a big set of guys on the other side. There's going to be a lot of them, and you're just going to have to kind of chew through them. And they all behave mostly the same. Like there's some guys who are real bullet sponges, and you have mechanics to dodge. And I also kind of hate. I think Outriders' camera is a little too tight, but that's another thing. Um, yeah, very basic mechanics to dodge. And that's kind of it. There's really no other. The other piece of this is there's no verticality. Anthem had a lot of verticality, and so did Mass Effect Andromeda, which really helped because you could do things like get people behind cover by popping into the air, right? Which makes you exposed, but you now get to negate enemy cover, for instance. Or you could do things like build 3D, like you could have a sort of lattice structure that has a bunch of guys on a roof here and an understructure where there aren't a lot of guys. So you stay down here and then you pop up with your jetpack and fall back down to kind of like get your pot shots off. Those sorts of encounters completely absent in Outriders. The only thing you have is chest high walls, which I just think is
Yeah, which
outdated at
also
this point.
like half I mean, I think cover shooters have their place, but like half the classes don't even use them, right? Like the ones that we were like, the Stony. I can't remember what the correct name for
Devastators.
Devastator. Um, they're all about like getting up in things' faces and shooting them. Which, again, like this is to go to your point. Like there's some very weird mechanics here, right? Like the game wants you to fight, right? Like it'll reward you with health back if you do certain things. For the Devastator, it's like kill something in short range. But the things that are bullet spongy health, right? Like you can't keep that going if you can't find a little thing to go then roll off and like pick off regen your health, which
Yep.
I think it isn't like quite tuned right, right? Because I don't think it's supposed to be that the Devastator's job is to clean up all the trash while like while like say the Technomancer goes and snipes something from goes and snipes the big boys from the back because the Technomancers don't have the damage to pull down one of those things by themselves. And if the thing closes in, the Technomancer is pretty fucked, right? Like when we were playing, every time I went out ahead to deal like to kind of like screw stuff up, I kind of left you in the dust, and you would end up dying, and then I would end up dying because I couldn't handle this stuff by myself.
There were a lot of times. I will say one thing that worked about the enemy design is there were a lot of times where I felt threatened by certain mobs as one class that were easy pickings as the other class. So, for instance, on Technomancer, I could deal with basically all those. I could deal with those little guys all day, because I'm sitting in cover. They pop out. I just plink 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 or whatever, easy, not no trouble at all, right? So just the basic generic mooks. I mean, but the breachers who have a certain amount of armor and they have shotguns and they get really up in your face, those guys killed me constantly because they force you out of the cover and then they're just chasing you down with a shotgun and you're a technomancer. You have no recourse at that position. Those guys are easy when you're a devastator. It's the little guys that kill you because the little guys and I actually do like this. I think in general I would go to bat for the way that this works. The little guys kick your shit in if you are not in cover, right? And the way this works with the Devastator is you have to have one of the protection abilities. So either the one that covers you in rocks, you take a bunch less damage, right? Or you
Like
reflect you
bullets.
reflect bullets. Um, but like if you are moving around, you're just like killing these breachers, having a good old times, and your golem runs out. Like, boy, oh boy, you gotta find cover quick because those like little bitches will plug you instantly. Like I just died so much because they have just, I don't know, they just laser like ability to kill you as soon as you're out of cover. I do think that that's like overall good. I think I would say that a play style for a devastator that is when you have the ability to protect yourself, you can really get up in somebody's faces, but then when that ability goes on cooldown, you need to kind of like hide, play it safe, be cautious. That like makes sense to me in sort of a game design way. But I don't think that I just think that that's like basics. That's like bare minimum, right?
Yeah,
Basically, any other game could deliver on that. But where Outriders fails to deliver is on any other kind of more interesting or more compelling, right? Like even just fighting guys that have mechanics to them that I can sort of take from place to place. Like one of the things that Mass Effect did is they would just have very similar, monsters fight you, and those monsters all behave the exact same way. If you fought a brute, you know that it had this charge thing that it does, you know that it has this swipe thing that it does, you know that it has this yell where if it gets close, it'll yell and it'll stun you for a second and pop you out of cover or whatever. And like you can play around and mix and match with these different enemy types, right? So all of these different enemies each have the kind of their own mechanics, kind of like trash mobs would in a WoW dungeon. I never got that feeling about any of these guys, outside of the fact that breachers use a shotgun. There are guys who will sometimes put a little sniper thing on your head, and if you pop out of cover, they shoot you for all your health, right? Like bare minimum basic stuff.
And I kind of agree with you that like at kind of like the low level, the balance is kind of there, right? Like, you know, Technomancer deals with long range guys, Devastator deals with close range guys. Um, but like those bigger, chunkier enemies that are kind of like the boss enemies, I just don't think they interact with the mechanics particularly well. I also think like I've got some like weird, like some very specific nitpicks, right? Like I think Reflect Bullets is a cool ability. I also think that it's like very like weirdly done, right? Like I stand like as a character, I'm standing there for like feels like 10 seconds, just like pointing myself in a direction, right, and absorbing bullets. Right, and when I got the hang of it, I felt like we had moments where I felt like Reinhardt in like Overwatch, right? Like
Yeah, I
I'd
think that
hope,
is the intended goal of reflect bullets, right? Is you put it up and then your guys behind you are shooting through the wall and you're kind of this mobile piece of cover. But that only works if you have, people to take advantage of it with. Though I
yeah,
will say reflect bullets is also fucking disgusting and incredibly imbalanced. I think partially because it is completely useless against like the dogs, right? Like it reflect bullets does basically nothing. I think it technically reflects some of their melee damage to you, right? But like in any situation where there's a big giant group of enemies with guns who shoot you, reflect bullets is insanely good.
yeah, no, and I agree. But like the actual gameplay of it, right? Like the thing that makes Reinhardt work well, I think, is that you can like put up and pull down the shield relatively quickly, right?
Mhm.
Like Black Bolts is up for 10 seconds and like you can cancel it early and then it's down for like 10, like a while. I think it's like 10 seconds. And like you can't switch back and forth between them fast enough to like to make it like a super, a super impactful. And like if you end it early, it feels like a waste and it feels like and then it goes on cooldown for like the full time.
Yep.
Um and it's also taking up a third of your slot, right? Like it's a third of your abilities, which in the end of the world, it's I like it better than like I like it better from a gameplay perspective than Golem because Golem is just like you hit a button and you take less damage. What do you?
Oh, I
Where
actually like Golem better, but I think Golem has better modifiers is why. Golem is really fun. The thing that I did with Golem was there is one talent that says when you have your protection skill up, which by the way is a terrible talent for reflect bullets. When you have a protection skill up, your firepower is increased by 40%, right? And there are a couple ones that's like the duration of your golem is increased by 100%. Every time you kill a guy while golem is active, its duration is increased by some percent. And also maybe there's one that's like really just those two, right? Because what you get in are these like chain kill scenarios where you run in, you golem up, and you're just trying to kill as many dudes as possible, right? And if you can get that, like if you can get that snowball rolling, it's like you feel like a god. It's insanely fun, right? But it is so contingent on those other two because the base duration of golem is so short that it's practically worthless. And that is only if you can, like mow down guys quickly enough that it matters, right? Like this is a build that has absolutely no use on a boss fight, right?
yeah,
Um, there's actually another piece of this that is also fun, which is when you use a kinetic ability, you can increase your firepower by 70%. Um, and Boulder Dash, which is a kinetic ability where you just run forward and smash a guy, you can use Boulder Dash, and there's a thing that reduces Boulder Dash's cooldown by 50% natively, which means you can have 100% uptime on that 70% firepower buff. I feel like this is just like the cool build that they were like looking for, where you just boulder dash on cooldown for no reason. You just are spamming it so that you get this bonus, you get this uptime, and then you have Golem running and you're just like killing guys with whatever your 110% extra firepower. Like that is fun. That is like that is very cool. I did not find anything nearly as cool in Reflect Bullets in its modifications, right? Like I couldn't figure out a way to make a build out of Reflect Bullets just because the modifiers themselves were pretty boring and uninteresting overall.
Yeah, yeah. That I think that might just be the killer there, right? Like I said, like the looter part isn't fleshed out enough, right?
Yeah.
Like I think like if we're talking about the weaknesses of the different series, right? Like I think Anthem's big weakness to me was that like the mechanical base was there, but the implementation wasn't super great. It was ultimately its downfall, right? Like the actual minute to minute gameplay wasn't wasn't super like the or rather it wasn't the minute to minute gameplay. It was like it was stuff like like the damage scaling on the guns being all fucked, right? Like
Yeah, I think
and
it
being
was
super
like
repetitive. There wasn't enough of it, maybe. Um,
I almost want to say also the environments were bad. One of the things I like about Outriders is that the environments were very varied, right? So you had desert, you had jungle, you had, these things. Everything in Anthem was that one like weird
like vaguely
jungle
like
canyon
yeah.
thing. So like I like the enemies, I like the encounter design, I liked all that stuff better, but you're just kind of everything is in the exact same spot. In the chat, Marisha says, honestly, I think I'd like Outriders more if there was like a way to set builds and swap more easily. This is another thing I liked about Anthem. In Anthem, everything was tied to your gear, right? So all you needed to do to swap was you just at the end of a mission or whatever, you go, you swap out this for that, and all of a sudden, boom, you have a new build. You have a new because it was all tied into the armor. It was all built on the suit, right? Um, that was something that was very finicky in Outriders. That was really frustrating to deal with because a lot of the time I was getting stuff where like the stuff was better, but like like in the field you get an item and it shows the upgrade, right? But what if it's modifying a skill that you're not using? What if the thing that you're using in that slot does modify a skill that you use all the time or whatever, right? Something that I found was the gun modifiers were much more impactful than I thought they were. Like at first I was just going by the number. You see the number, you see the up arrow, you're like, okay, green arrow, this thing is better. But like the gun modifiers had a huge impact on what I was using and when. Like partially because they interact with your class, right? Like I had a gun that I used for a long time just because the gun inflict bleed. And Devastators key off of bleed in a lot of different ways, right? Like I can set things up so that bleed is an important, if I am forcing things to bleed, that changes the way that my class plays in so material context that's worth a couple hundred points of whatever. But there's also just stuff that's like getting the freeze ability that like you shoot a guy and he is frozen solid for a couple seconds is so good. And like the thing that's like when you reload your first bullet burns the target for a couple it's like how is that ever going to be as good as being able to freeze a guy in place and then shoot him 5 times in the head in a row? Like that I felt was very I don't know, out of whack.
Yeah, I feel like the reload could be good on like one of the single shotguns, but like I see your point. I think part of the problem here too is like what we were discussing when we were playing is that I don't think the frames are well balanced. Like the gun frames are well balanced against each other, right? Like I, and like that's like a lot. That's like screwed up by the DPS numbers, right? Like
Yep.
I had like an auto shot. Like I got an auto shotgun that was a significant upgrade, and it was just terrible. Not only because like it did like okay damage, but like it had like I burned through all the ammo in it like lickety split, right? Which is like just not right,
I felt
right?
all the shotguns were very unfun to play with. I never found a shotgun that I thought was good, and I thought the assault rifles were too good.
I had a lot.
Even when I was playing Technomancer, I felt like I had no reason to use the single shot rifles that I felt like I was built for over an assault rifle. The assault rifles just put out more damage at a better rate of fire more consistently in almost every experience.
I had fun with the pump shotguns, right? Like I thought the auto shotguns just like didn't work, right? They were too wimpy. And these are also not like so the frame balancing against each other. I will say are things that like could be fixed in post, right? Like you could
Mm.
do a balance pass on those things. It's just numbers, right? Like it's not like it's like something inherent to to the game in a way that I think that like these problems I see with like kind of like this skill variety um are a problem for the I think a problem a larger problem for the system in the right. Like you'd have to do significantly more work to do that. I think you could balance the gun things against each other. And you know, I don't think the game's terrible, right? Like I definitely put this kind of in that like fan of the genre territory. Um, and there's not a lot of games in the genre, so you know maybe it's worth it from that perspective. Um,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah,
I,
I also think that it is hard to really parse for me a little what some of the differences are that make that the case, because I love shotguns in Payday and Killing Floor, right? And I think maybe part of it is those games had better enemy design. Like that, this comes back to kind of encounters and enemies, right? Like one of the things that was nice about Killing Floor, for instance, is that you understood the kinds of enemies that you were up against and where the shotgun was going to work for you inside of an individual like playthrough, right? So like you might pick up the shotgun not because of like its raw damage output, right? But because it had a specific purpose of I can use the shotgun to quickly and efficiently deal with the crawlers on the floor, right? Because you don't really need to aim. Those guys are really fast and they have no HP, so you just kind of point it at the ground and turn it on, and boom, 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 they're all dead. And that's why I have a shotgun, right? But whereas in this game, and maybe in looter shooters in general, right? Because I'm tying things into that overall firepower number, right? And I'm thinking about the raw DPS, and I'm kind of comparing all of my weapons against that. Um, it sort of creates this lowest common denominator problem,
so
underwriting everything.
I think part of the problem with this too is that there's two slots in Outriders. Like I believe Borderlands gives you four, right? Like
Hmm.
you can give a slot to a specialized weapon, which is shotgun. Shotguns tend towards that area. Um, if your other three, like you know, if you can have like your workhorse, right? Like your assault rifle, you generally have your workhorse gun and a couple specialization gun, like you know, a short range gun, a long range gun, and you know, a wildcat or something. Right? That's kind of like roughly what you do. Um, um, and in this game, you kind of need to like need like a workhorse and like maybe one specialization gun, but the workhorse guns are like I think part of it might be that the reload animations might be too long. Like it might be something as simple as that because like it feels like you almost want two workhorses, um, like uh, and like the sidearm like I don't know. I
I
think
felt
this
like sidearms were useless.
yeah I enjoyed mine, but that's just because I like the revolver aesthetic, right? Like I would never like and like you could dump fire out of them like fire them pretty quickly, but like they're supposed to be backup, right? Like they're supposed to be like you know they have infinite ammo. But
Yeah,
like
I feel like because they have infinite ammo, they are built to be a fallback, and ammo is so plentiful that I never really had issues with it across my two main guns. There were plenty of times where I ran out of ammo on one gun, but then I just swapped to my other main gun, and it would ride me out until the end of the encounter. I
yeah,
never got into a position where I was out of ammo on both guns.
and like you're never going for a build. I don't feel like where you're running two guns that have ammo problems, right? Like I said, the auto shotgun has ammo problems, but it's also not better enough. Like it's not better enough that I would consider running it. Like you know, I just like ditch that gun at the first opportunity, right? Like I need something like very good to like make that a trade off, and like maybe I could see a scenario where like you know two very good guns that have very limited ammo. We were relying on your sidearm, maybe, but like not there, right? Like that was
I also feel like there's an extra dimension here, which is the modifiers on the guns themselves, right? Like, so for instance, maybe you're carrying a gun. I can see somebody create a build that's like, okay, I have my gun for freezing people and then my gun for following up. So I freeze, swap, shoot you in the head with a sniper rifle for massive damage or something, right? That is a consideration that is built on the ability for one of my guns to like freeze or whatever, but like I feel like that's a very niche application that I would want extra options for in general, right? And I don't know, that makes it hard. Maybe part of it is that like you know what something Killing Floor is actually kind of a bad example. Killing Floor doesn't make doesn't make you really choose across gun genre that much, because you're playing a class and you have access to guns, and the classes are suited to the guns that it is suited to, right? So for, the support class, which is suited to shotguns, it reduces the spread, right? Whereas the commando class with the assault rifle, their thing is increasing, like rate of fire and magazine size or whatever. And so like, because those classes are suited towards the guns naturally, right, and towards shoring up the gun's natural weaknesses, um I'm really only ever comparing shotguns to shotguns, right? I'm only looking at, do I want this shotgun or that shotgun when I'm playing a support, or that assault rifle when I'm playing a commando. The only thing that they do here is just say, you do 20% more damage with fucking assault rifles. That's it. That's like, and it's a talent that you have to talent into or whatever. Um, which I just think is kind of like not heavy enough. Even when I was playing
I also think
Devastator,
it's
I
a
kind of
bad
felt like
talent, right? Like I like
yeah.
like
The only thing I like about it, the thing I like about it most actually, is that it increases the drop rate of those weapons. So I used it to guarantee that I got assault rifles more often than not, because I thought assault rifles were the best.
yeah. Yeah, I think part of the primary, like kind of a general problem here is that like you want like the shotgun to be the thing you pull out when something's close to you, and that's not necessarily the case, right? Like you are almost just as well served pulling out an assault rifle, and also like you're gonna run out of it. Like I said, I think the pump shotgun felt good to me, but like it's just like not better enough, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I feel like the real thing you want from shotgun is like close range burst damage, right?
right.
Like imagine a version where you have an auto shotgun, and when you're really close to somebody and you can just unload 10 rounds in a second and a half. That I think is better than an assault rifle. I could make a case for myself to pick that up over an assault rifle. But when the assault rifle is also going to do about that same damage and also has medium and long range implications, right? I think it's fine. But like, maybe, maybe if we were in a world where, okay, using an assault rifle, you have a really bad weapon spread unless you like do something to fix that, right? Then I would get it. Then I would understand, because now all of a sudden, okay, maybe it's not that good of a medium range weapon if I'm not doing something to reduce the spread. Um, but I don't know. Honestly, maybe they do that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was back end stuff that said that assault rifles and shotguns behave differently depending on like what class you were. Because I don't really play I guess I played Technomancer, but I didn't really sense it when I played Technomancer.
Yeah,
So
I think that like I think part of this ties back to my initial point, which is that the gunplay isn't spectacular.
yeah.
Like things don't feel super great. Like so the other big point is like I play a fair amount of COD for shits and giggles, and like the multiplayer
Mhm.
aspect of that, right? It's like switching weapons isn't free, but it's like good enough that like it feels like right to switch weapons for the correct task. It feels a little slow in this game, right? Like um not only that, but like on the shotgun, like, and granted, this is against other players, so it works slightly differently from like field point. But like a shotgun shot at close range is either one or two shots and the person's dead, right? Like whereas like an assault rifle is like a little bit more sustained, but like you can also keep that going for longer, right? Like the heaviest hitting shotgun in Black Ops, right? You have two shots before you have to reload the thing, and so if you miss it, you're fucked, right? Like whereas like the assault rifle probably isn't as effective at super close range, but like you can sustain fire for longer, right? And like the LMG's a bigger version of that here, right? Like the LMGs, like I think there were a couple of things that like were vaguely LMG like. They didn't feel that distinct from assault rifles. Um,
They were assault rifles with really big magazines and really long reload times,
yeah,
basically.
right, and that is effectively what they are in most games, but like there's like a character difference, right? Like they feel chunkier, right? Like and like I don't know, I think part of it might just kind of be like aesthetics, right?
Mhm.
Like this is something I've talked about before with Destiny. Destiny nails kind of like the aesthetic perfectly. Or that's what contributes to the feel, the proper
Honestly,
feel.
I think part of that is also the enemies in Destiny. Destiny has very satisfying enemies to get crits on, because
Yeah,
like, you have very clear critical points and hitting them feels good. This is also true of Mass Effect. I remember one of the things in Mass Effect 3 that I thought was great was landing headshots was so satisfying. Like with the Cerberus troopers, they had this their armor is like all white and they have a big white like helmet or whatever. But when you shoot them in the head kind of explodes in this fountain of like not fountain. It's not gory, right? But it's like I don't know. It's sort of the same.
It's a feedback, right? Like,
It's the same. It's the feedback loop, and it's entirely aesthetic, right? But it is just shooting that guy in the head and watching his head go like a like a zit popping or something. I mean, that's gross, I guess, but right, like that's just there's just something
no,
satisfying
no.
about that in a way
Like,
that it is
this
not
is actually
satisfying in this
this
game.
was a super big problem of mine with was the Killing Floor that game we played together. Like the headshots, like had like I think like they didn't feel right, right? Like they like I could barely tell I was doing or until I knew what to look for, and even then I didn't feel like they were super satisfying to hit, right? Like, um,
I actually like the headshots and killing floor a lot, but you do you, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Like I don't think they consistently like they didn't consistently do the explosion thing, right? Like I think it was like a chance, and like sometimes like it was just like I think a light, or something. Um,
Oh, and also sometimes they will live through the headshot, which sucks. Because you kill a guy and you expect him to fall over, but in Killing Floor, there's zombies, obviously. So you shoot a guy in his head pops off, and he's still coming at you because,
yeah,
he still has health or whatever.
yeah. No, I just found the feedback there to not be particularly convincing. I mean, maybe that was like there's a whole bunch of stuff there. We're not talking about that game, but like this
Sure.
game, like sometimes like the like on the boss, right? Like the crit shots aren't super legible sometimes, which doesn't make sense. Also, there's just like a weirdly specific problem with like sniper rifles where like you're zoomed in so much that like the number pops off the top of the screen, right? Like you were talking, I experienced this, and you were talking about this too, right? Like where like the class where it matters most for is the sniper rifle, right? It's harder to tell that you've gotten like the critical shot, which is again like that's like a little thing that you could probably fix with like a fix pass, but um
One thing that drove me nuts in Outriders, this is from chat, is for Trickster there was a whole shotgun build, but literally the most effective skill is absolutely horrible with shotguns. Yeah, I definitely get that. The skill in question I think is the one that buffs your it buffs your gun damage by a certain amount or whatever, right? So it just says gives your gun a good your gun is good damage now, right? Um and I think that thing was built for yeah, it buffs gun damage but ends on reload. So you get 3 pumps with a shotgun and then you immediately have to reload and you lose the thing versus a big gigantic magazine, right, with an assault rifle. I definitely get that. I also had that on Technomancer, but on Technomancer it makes more sense because you're geared towards assault rifles and single shot rifles, which have bigger magazines in general.
I think the part of the problem here is that there's a most effective skill, right? Like
Yeah.
that like it's like a fundamental problem here, right? Like it's that like it doesn't quite work right. I don't think.
Yeah, that most effective skill, I think, it's kind of it's like it reminds me of the Mallrat powers problem in Torghast,
Hmm.
where Mallrat powers are bad because they are not useful on the boss, and the only thing that really matters in a Torghast run is being able to like do the boss, right? It was the same sort of thing, right? Like when you have these giant bullet sponge bosses, your abilities just don't matter. Your abilities are just never going to make the difference, right? What is going to be able to make the difference is you just sit there and you unload clip after clip after clip into these, huge gigantic hitboxes for massive damage. And insofar as that is sort of like the boss design and the encounter design, it's bad. Another thing I do want to bring up, did I ever tell you about the MOBA that I played that was over the shoulder?
Was it Smite?
No, a while ago, I played a MOBA that is in development
Oh, I think you did mention this, but yeah, go on.
yeah. And one of the things, and we were giving feedback on this thing, and one of the things about it was the MOBA itself was over the shoulder, right? So the camera was over the shoulder, but it had clearly taken all of its sort of game design notes from League of Legends, right? So it like really behaved like League of Legends, and it didn't properly reckon with the difference in how cameras work over the shoulder versus what is
Gotcha.
effectively isometric, right? Being able to shoot down onto a plane. Because when I'm shooting down onto a plane, it's very easy for me to draw, like inside of that XY plane if my camera is along the Z axis. I hope this is reading to people who can't see me like waving my hands around in the camera or whatever. Um, but if your camera is over the shoulder, your camera is on the X axis or the Y axis, either one, right? So you can't really draw stuff on that XY plane and have it really be like legible because it's not perpendicular, it's parallel, right? And that was a huge issue I had with or I'm sorry, not Anthem, Outriders. It was a huge issue I had with Outriders. Outriders wants you to respect ground AoE, like skill shot indicators or whatever, but it cuts off like the camera barely shows your feet, and you want to be aiming down sights for a lot of it, which just narrows your vision even more. So it's kind of like asking you to deal with mechanics, right? Without giving you the proper indicators of those mechanics, because it's essentially using like WoW game language of saying, oh, I draw a circle on the floor, don't stand in this circle. But if my camera is pointed along the floor and I'm zoomed in because I'm aiming down sights at a boss or whatever, I'm just going to miss the fucking circle and take a ton of damage. And that sucks and is unfun and uncool. And there's another thing, by the way, that Anthem did right because of the verticality. With Anthem, because there's that verticality, you can look down at a plane like that, right? It also is just wider on the person, so it was much easier to like dodge these big things happening at any individual time because your mobility was increased with an ability to move vertically, um, and your vision was increased by your ability to look down at the thing that you need to be avoiding.
And part of that's just camera too, right? Like where the camera's positioned.
Hmm.
Um, like you can pull the like WoW, is kind of nominally over the shoulder in a lot of cases, right? But like you can pull it back and it makes more sense.
Yeah, I would
Um,
argue that it's isometric in like raid dungeon content, right? You want to pull that camera all the way back because you're looking for the
right,
for the swirlies on the
but
floor.
it's like halfway between, right? Because like you're still like
Yeah.
behind your character most of the time.
Mhm.
Um, or like I'd have to think about it, but Destiny I don't feel like has these problems either. Um,
See, I think Destiny designs around that, and this
yeah,
I
that's
would
what I
give
mean.
Destiny a
Like,
lot of credit for this because I feel like a lot of the things that I'm dealing with in Destiny are eye level, right? It's like an orb spawns that's at eye level that's shooting you with damage,
right.
right? Or something kind of along those sorts of lines.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. Right. Like Destiny uses the right tools for it, right? Like it's tools in the
Like I can't
toolbox.
think of. I mean, obviously, I only ever did that one raid, which was in the very beginning of Destiny's lifetime. So, like this is not definitive. But even in that raid, I don't think I remember a single like ground effect that had that circle that I was looking to get out of. Whereas Outrider was full of these, right? There are some things that are okay, right? Like there are those beams that the bosses would spawn. Sometimes they would spawn a little purple vortex or whatever. But I don't know. In general.
Yeah, no, I Destiny, like you're right. Everything's basically at eye level, and anything that's like, I feel like anything that's like a groundish level is like has like vertical spikes to it, so you can like see it happening. Or vertical
Yeah, I also
elements to
think
it.
a lot of the threat in Destiny is just incoming fire, but Destiny kind of has Doom rules of my shots are hit scan, your shots are projectiles. So most of the enemies are shooting you with dodgeable projectiles rather than shooting you with just like blanket hit scan damage, which, and I actually think blanket hit scan damage is not that bad, right? Like this game has blanket hit scan damage that I would not say is
A
bad because it's
problem.
built
Yeah,
around cover, right? Um, but I think that all that stuff kind of like interacts to kind of make things, I don't know,
yeah.
make things better. The last thing I want to talk about Outriders is the story because I think the story is not great. How far do we man?
I don't care
I
about
m-
spoilers, but
yeah, the big thing. This will be spoilers, I guess. So if you boy really care about it, please feel free to drop. The big thing about Outriders is that story kept going. It just every I thought that game was ending at 5 individual places, and then it was just like, oh no no no, there's another like thing for us to do. We got to go do this like other thing, and like just when you feel like it introduces I don't know. It introduces just like a new concept. Like first you're in the trenches, then you're in this war, then you're dealing with this guy who's another altered. Then he dies. Then you fight his other guy. Oh, that's where we ended.
Yeah,
We killed Moloch.
yeah,
There is like a full other game that happens after that point. That is not even close to the end, and you haven't even met the final bad guy.
yeah. I felt like Seth like just kind of jobs her. Like none of the characters seem to like. There's like Jakob, and like I guess this Asian girl that's apparently his granddaughter or his daughter
Yep.
rather is like a thing that we have to care about. Um, but like I don't know, also like the moment to moment parts of the story were bad, right? Like I wasn't expecting much, right? Like I don't care, right? Like it's I'm not playing this game for like a deep and enriching story, right? Like it'd be nice if it was, right? Like I have spent hours like combing through Destiny lore, but like I don't need it in order for the game to be compelling, right? Like I fucking killed the Skeleton King like 72 times, and I didn't care anymore either time. I just it was a great way to get loot. Um, but like it's I don't know, it was like laughably bad. Um,
Yeah, the story is built on constant plot twists. So it's just like, oh, Seth is dead. Okay. Then you fight Moloch. All right. Then you go into the desert and oh no, you don't go to the desert first. Then you go into the jungle with the from the very beginning with the black goop. Okay. Then you meet some jungle boys and the jungle boys have an antidote to the black goop. Okay, fine. The antidote to the black goop is people. Kill the jungle boys. Then you go to the desert and you find there are aliens. And then you fight mutated humans that you think are humans, but they're actually mutated aliens. And you're constantly being introduced to characters, and characters are getting killed off. Jakob dies. I'm just gonna
but
I'm just gonna give you the Wikipedia summary.
go for it.
Jakob fucking dies. He does the super like lame and cliche thing of like he's in a fight, he doesn't have a gun, and he like tackles somebody off of an edge or whatever to save Channa, the girl. Um, there's another character that dies and then leaves, and then he like comes back, and it's this heroic moment, and you're just like, what the fuck? What is going on? Learning about the aliens was like nuts because you eventually find out that like so you eventually find out that there was another ship that came to Earth before your ship came, or I'm sorry, not Earth, came to this planet, whatever this fucking planet is called, before your ship came to this planet, and it was just faster. That's the lore. It was your ship was slower than this ship because they made newer, faster engines, so they got here faster, and they also
That's
genocided
like
these fucking aliens.
that's a straight up plot point from like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like it's like
Yeah, it was also the ship that blew up. There in when you're talking to Jakob, he talks about there's a ship, there are two ships that are made. There's your ship and then there's another ship. And the other ship blew up, right? In orbit or whatever. So when you first find that ship, it's called this and you're just like, "What the fuck? Are we going back in time?" I'm so confused. And it's just like it's just bad. It's bad. I agree with you. I don't really think this stuff needs to be great in order to be like worthwhile, but boy, do I wish it was better. This is another thing that I think Anthem did really well, and is another reason why I miss it and I loved Anthem a lot. Anthem had a story and it had like lore and everything. Um, but I was invested in those characters, and boy, when you get betrayed, you spend half of the game in Anthem hanging out because you're in the suit, and then you have a guy who's like in your ear, right? And you're like bantering, and they're telling you what to do or whatever. And the whole point of Anthem is you're going to find this super special piece of armor, like the Legion of Dawn armor or whatever. You find the armor, and your guy in your ear shuts down your suit, trapping you, and he goes and he steals the armor because he's been jealous that he's been sitting in a computer chair and not out killing people and doing the cool hero shit or whatever. I was so invested in that. I was like I was honestly not interested in Anthem at all until that point. And I was just like, fuck. Whoa, like all of a sudden this is like a big boy, this is like a big boy game. Cause like and then he shows up later. It's like a whole thing, like more stuff, but that's like real character drama. Um Outriders just does not hit in the same does not hit in the same way, and it's pretty stupid and pretty bad.
What's the thing on Moloch's back? Because that was clearly like teased in the cutscene.
No idea. You don't fight Moloch ever again. You fight
Really?
Moloch there. he gets away, right? And then you go off into the desert and you do all this other stuff. The final boss of the game, by the way, is an evil alien called like, I don't know, something. It was something stupid. I don't remember his fucking name. You fight him once after he kills Jakob. Then you fight him again. He shows up again and is inexplicably the final boss. Um, and in the end of the game, because the whole point of the game is you need to send a signal to the
The
to the
ship.
ship so you can send down drop pods or whatever. In the end of the game, you watch the drop pods like raining down over the thing, and you go and it goes and it shows you Trench Town, and it shows you that first girl that you hung out with, and it shows you whatever. And one of the people that it has a little cutscene watching the pods fall is Moloch, and that's it.
And then like the end game is like you're just replaying through everything. Like there's no
Yeah,
like
the end game is you're replaying through everything. I do think there is something akin to a raid or a dungeon, but you have to unlock it by getting good enough gear because the thing that you are now doing is trying to get drop pods, which are like loot chests, not like loot boxes. They're just like they are chests that contain loot. So I'm pretty sure as you replay story quests and side missions and stuff like that, you are picking up these drop pods and they open, and sometimes they might have, I don't know,
good stuff in.
legendaries and stuff. I didn't have any interest in farming any more than that. I pretty quickly switched to another game. And that's it. Yeah, I guess that's Outriders.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Uh
that's the perfect segue. Which game did you switch to, buddy?
a Game Dev Tycoon actually. Have you played Game Dev Tycoon?
I have not.
It is like a game where you get to sort of choose. It takes you through history, right? So you start off making like text adventures, right? But as you go, you get like better and better at making games, and eventually you can become like the next like Blizzard or whatever. And honestly, it is not a hard game. It is just kind of, though I did fail it, so maybe it is a hard game. Um, I got kind of locked into a place where, like, if you're not upgrading your graphics quickly enough, your games start getting like worse and worse reviews.
Do you
And
have
I
to
was
tighten
sitting
the
in a place
graphics on level
where,
2?
yeah, I was sitting in a place where my company was so close to going under that the only thing I could afford doing is immediately pushing out a new game every couple of, like as soon as I finished work on one game, I had to go to another game, right? But what the game wants you to do is take breaks to develop new engines for your future games, and that's where you can upgrade your graphics, right? So you can like research graphics, like 3D graphics 1, and then if you make a couple graphics 1 3D graphics 1 games, you will unlock the research for 3D graphics 2, and then you can put 3D graphics 2 in your next engine. But I was in a position where I didn't have the time to make a new engine, so I kept having to put games out with 3D graphics 1, and they were getting reviewed poorly, and my company folded, so that sucked. But then I made a new company, and now it's like God mode. Uh, I am simultaneously Blizzard and Steam, because one of the things that you can do in the end game is put gobs of money towards like quote unquote R&D projects. One of the R&D projects is your own special convention like BlizzCon. And another one of them is you create your own storefront like Steam. So
So your Epic Games. When do you sue Apple?
yeah, oh, I guess actually, yeah, I am Epic Games anyway. There's a couple other ones. You can do VR, which I was never interested in. You can do I think you can do the Connect, because there's another hardware thing that you can like work for and like make or whatever. But the funny thing is that it follows game design history. Um so, or like game development history. So things like the Dreamcast, like, there is a 1-to-1 for all of these, right? The Game Boy is the Gameling, the Nintendo Wii is I think it's called the Memento New or something. Instead of the Xbox, it's the M Box. Instead of the PlayStation, it's the Game Station or something like that. So it's like all these things have like a 1-to-1, right? But if a product does poorly in real life, it does poorly in game. So like if you ever develop anything for the Dreamcast, you're fucked because the Dreamcast immediately flops. Like, or there's a couple of other versions of these, like the Ouya, which is obviously famously that one Kickstarter console that never really went anywhere, that kind of stuff. So
Well, it came
yeah,
out, but it's like an Android box, so but that's neither here
yeah.
nor there.
Honestly, I was just looking for something to occupy my space while I watched Futurama on my other screen.
Did it succeed?
Yeah, yeah. It is honestly a pretty good game, and I have been going back a little bit. One of the things that's neat is you find things out over time, right? Like when I make a game, I can make an educated guess. I can say like, oh, a young action game is good for the NES, right? Like towards like young audiences, and it's an action game. But there's like different modifiers for the different, for the like the different games. Like so, for instance, making a casual game for the iPhone is better than making a strategy game for the iPhone. Do you know what I mean? Because like the iPhone is a platform that is more suited to
Yeah,
casual than strategy, if that makes sense.
makes sense.
Though I have also been a little mad because I will sometimes try and replicate games that we know did really well. Like I once made a casual strategy game for the iPhone, like Castle Crasher or what was that?
Battle
Clash
Royale,
Royale.
Clash Royale.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Um, and it flopped, and I was like, what the fuck? Also, yeah, the other thing is that like and then you have a couple of like employees, and you can train your employees to be better at design, better at tech, better at speed, and you can make those and you assign those employees to do specific things. So every game has like gameplay, it has story, it has engine, it has graphics and sound, right? And you assign people, and you want to assign people that have like a good stat array for the thing, right?
Right,
So for instance, your story and quest guy wants all design. It doesn't give a fuck about technology, right? But your gameplay guy wants a lot of design and a little bit of tech. Whereas your engine person is all tech, no whatever. And you got to like mix and match, and
right,
you got to decide how much of the game is going to be devoted to each of these things, right? So for instance, if you're doing an RPG, you need to have a lot of story in order for the game to be good. But if you're doing an action game, you need to have a lot of gameplay for the story to be good. So yeah, it's honestly pretty complex. I don't really know why I picked this up again, but I did, and it's sweet. So there you go.
fun, fun. On my end, I've been playing a lot of Spellbreak, which is a game that friend of the cast Monix just replay. It was a game I played back in pre-alpha as well. Um, it's very polished, or not very polished, but it's like pretty polished now. You essentially play a wizard, or a sorcerer. You have a magical glove that like casts a certain type of spell. Your primary glove gives you certain benefits, and then in the battle royale mode, which is kind of like the more famous mode, you can pick up a second glove. Well, both modes you pick up a second glove, and like you can do like the basic attacks with it, but you don't get like the special skills with it. Um, and it's basically kind of like a third person shooter because like the primary things in both gloves are like a projectile of some sort, and they each have a sorcery, which is for the fire gauntlet there's a firewall, for the a poison gauntlet is a poison cloud. Sometimes they interact with each other, right? Like if you have a poison cloud out there and you hit it with fire, it explodes in like an explosion. um
That's cool.
yeah, no, the interactions are pretty neat. There are also some some interesting interactions like the wind gauntlet isn't particularly like strong, powerful like damage wise, but like um if it's your primary gauntlet, you can like bounce off of things with it, and then like your skill, which is a tornado, it sucks people in, but for you it'll launch you into the air. um it's also very vertical, right? Like every character can hover. You also, the other big mechanic is it's called a rune, and basically it's generally a movement ability. Like there's a teleport, there's a flight, there's a dash, there's a spring step, there's also like an invisibility and a couple other variations. There's also one that's like see people through walls. um and then there's like some items. It's like style wise it feels very Fortnite to me, but it doesn't have like the building aspect. But it's a lot of fun, it's very good. It's relatively high skill, which I like. Nothing like, unlike games with like guns, like nothing. There's like maybe the electricity gauntlets hit scan, but everything else is kind of like projectiles. So there's a lot of jumping around, a lot of like dueling with people, a lot of flying through the sky. You have mana, which limits how much you can cast. And it also powers your levitation, so there's aspects there. Um, it's got a lot of like little things to it too. It's a lot of fun. I've been having a great time with it. I've been playing with friend of the cast. Monarch, it's available on like something, the kind of meta that I think it does really well is it's on all the systems and there's one unified account. So like I'm playing on EGS because there's like a Twitch Prime benefit for it. but I also have Xbox Game Pass, and on Xbox, if you have Game Pass, it'll give you the Season 2 pass for free. So I downloaded it onto my Xbox to get this Game Pass, but I can play it on my computer. I still have the Game Pass, right? So I think that's well done.
That's honestly pretty cool.
Yeah.
I remember when this was originally designed as a MOBA, because I remember a bunch of people at Riot left to make this company, or to work on this game, um, and I guess they must have swapped to a battle royale at some point because this was years ago. This is maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Some of the original people at Riot who did, do you know, God, he's the rabbit. No, man, I can't remember. He's the famous guy who designed a lot of champions, like artistically. He's like a cover artist. Iron Stylus was his name. He famously left to go work on Spellbreak.
Okay.
So they must have kind of pivoted to BR when the big BR revolution happened.
So,
However many
funnily
years ago.
enough, the ranked mode it's called Dominion, and it's like 5-on-5, and it's instead of it's like capture the point type gameplay, and there's like
Okay.
minions to kill, there's like mooks to kill, so it's almost there. Like it's kind of there. It's kind of, and it works much differently than the battle royale. I think the battle royale is a little bit better tuned, um, just because like the mechanic, like instead of like finding things on the ground, like when you do enough, you get a boon, and that'll translate into like you can get another glove. So I don't think it's quite done yet, or it's quite there yet. But like I think that's what we're going for. You can definitely see the MOBA roots there, rather.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess. Are there like characters? Is it like Apex like that, or is it all
So
based on these gloves and runes?
yeah, so you've got your skins are like monetized standard stuff, right? Like, but like your character is your primary gauntlet, right? Like, so
Okay.
just to give you like any, so like if I'm playing the Tempest or the called like the Lightning Gauntlet, it's got a different name. I can't remember what its real name is. But um it's got like a lightning bolt primary attack, and then it's got like a lightning strike, which disables an opponent that it hits for like a second. And that's true if you have it on your primary or your secondary. If you're if it's on your primary hand at level 1, it does more damage if you can hold down the button to fire it, unlike most of the gauntlets, or rather it fires kind of quickly. So every continuous hit does more damage up to a cap. At level 2, which it's time based in the ranked mode, and it's when you enter the next circle on the BR mode. Level 2, I believe, is when you cast your sorcery, you cast that lightning bolt, your rune gets an additional charge. Level 3 is that triple strike? Like one of them is the lightning bolt. No. Third one is when you strike, you have infinite mana for like the next 4 seconds. And level 4 is it strikes 3 times.
Okay.
And that's basically your class, right? Because when it's on your second hand, you don't get any of those benefits. Whereas like fire is level, like the initial one is that your primary ability burns, like it does a small DOT. Your second one, I believe, is when you pass through your firewall. You can fly for 2 seconds. The third one is your firewall does more damage in the first 2 seconds. And the last one is when your attack impacts the ground, it shatters. And so you get a lot of like I was saying with the Wind Gauntlet, the sorcery launches you in the air. That's only true if it's on your primary hand. Not true if it's on your secondary hand. And on top of that, you have 3 skills that are upgraded by finding scrolls. And there are things like more health, but those are also swappable, and you unlock the different skills by upgrading your gauntlets, because the gauntlets all have levels. So when you get your Wind Gauntlet, or no, your Fire Gauntlet to level 3, one of the skills you can swap to is when you die, you will come back once, as opposed to being dead. So and you're immune for seconds. And there's a whole point system there, and it's got some depth to it, and I think it's very well done. But your class is your primary gauntlet, right? Like if you're running toxic, you're, I guess, a toxicologist or something. And that impacts significantly how you're playing the game, right? Like Monic, friend of the cast, Monic really likes the Toxic Gauntlet because one of the later skills is when you pass into your um poison cloud, you're immune to it. There's a lot of friendly fire in this game, important, but like you pass in your poison cloud, you're immune to it, and you turn invisible, and then like you do more damage when you're so. There's a
Okay.
lot of synergy there. It's super fun. Um,
That's cool. I actually think I like this pitch a lot. The idea of like a fantasy, like a magic fantasy BR is very appealing. Um, I think one of the things I really like about it is the lack of sort of like hit scan weapons. It really solves some of the BR problems that you and I have talked about in the past, where, almost all of your interactions are these like long range sniper fights where you're just trying to look for like the pixel through the scope that
yeah,
moved
yeah,
or
that's very
whatever, right?
PUBG, right?
Like,
Yeah, yeah,
which like it's not terrible, and I get how that is appealing, but that was never my thing. Um,
yeah. These
Whereas this
fights are
seems much more up my
hyperkinetic.
alley.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
hyperkinetic.
How many
Um,
people are on a team? Is it like three, two, four?
so I have only I think there's up to four, and the rank mode is five. Um,
Okay,
I have only played duos with friend of the cast. Um,
fair enough.
but um, otherwise this week, have you heard of Hood Outlaws and something like a PvE PvP game? It came out this week, early access, or it came out early if you pre-ordered it.
Hood Outlaws and Legends.
Yeah, that one. So it's like your team is facing another team to try and steal a chest. I don't have much to say about this. I played the tutorial and refunded it because the key map, as is often the case, the key remapping doesn't work quite right. So the key remapping, so to its credit, I could map any of the keys I wanted to, but something that is hidden is that the arrow keys control the camera, and you can't remap that camera control. So when I remap my movement to the camera key to the arrow keys, if I pressed forward, the camera would shoot straight up.
Oh
And
my god, that's awful.
yeah, and so I played through the tutorial remapping the directional keys to like the numpad, the numpad top of the numpad, but like doesn't work with my normal setup. And I spent a couple of minutes. I spent 10 minutes looking to see if I could find a config file to change it, which is my normal thing for this. But at that point, after like trying and failing, I was just like, you know what? This game is interesting, but not cool enough for me to care. And I don't have tolerance for this anymore. And I've got so many other games I want to play, so I refunded it. Um,
I know these are the guys who did Greedfall too. I know the publishers.
oh,
This is the farming simulator publisher who publishes like all
I
the
would say
farming simulator games.
Greedfall. I could see like if they were the Greedfall people, I could see why. Like it's about that level of like not Eurojank, right? Like straight
Yeah.
Eurojank.
They also did Hard Faith Shipbreaker, which is a game that we got featured alongside a lot of, with like some of our games we get featured alongside. Hard Faith Shipbreaker is a really neat game. It's one where like you go to derelict spaceships and you have like a fusion cutter and you're cutting them up
Oh yeah,
so
yeah.
that you can scrap them or whatever. People have really nice things. I've always wanted to play it, but I've never actually gotten around to playing it. This is the same. This is the same folks, not the same developer, same publisher.
Yeah, yeah, no. And this game is I think technically in early access. Um, maybe not. If I would come back around and check it out again in 6 months to a year to see if it's better. Just like as I get older and as I have less free time to devote to gaming, I don't have patience for that kind of thing. Right. So
Fair enough.
um
Um, Obviously, we did ahead of the curve. Have you done any WoW things recently, or?
Um, so I pop in every once in a while, like I've been collecting stuff, getting that anima, um, doing some of my weeklies. Need to go run some dungeons just to like unlock some features in my garden, like my Queen's Conservatory or whatever, but I haven't bothered. Um, something that I've been thinking about a lot is because one of the things I do the most with WoW is because it's on my phone is I do the table missions.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and it's funny just like how like into these table like how much like I can like know about these table missions, like, oh, this goes like this. It's like, oh, it's like some of these missions like the for whatever reason there's a couple of Sinvir ones that like have like a full loadout of enemies that always punch above their weight in terms of like what they level they say they are. But like, my highest level character in that is like 50, just hit 54, I think. but I can clear
Okay.
the end game 60s, except for the Sinvir one, which is like like I said, significantly punching above its weight. I don't know why.
That one is built for AoE. You know, I was talking to a guy who had a similar problem. It's because those guys are when you have 8 enemies, the each individual enemy has more health and does more damage, but it's because you can hit more of them with your big AoE moves. So if you bring like an AoE comp to that, to that like vampire whatever, you will be able to kill through those enemies much quicker because you can, like, if you can blanket everybody with a bunch of damage, you can like remove 7 of the 8 guys or whatever it looks like. And you can remove 7 of the 8 guys, and then you're just fighting like one guy who's plinking away for nothing. Which I think is that, it's interesting because I think that's smart game design, right? That obviously like makes sense when I think about it, but it's very unintuitive given those two numbers that you see. The thing that was weird is that that's like a level, like it's like a level 51 mission, which has worse numbers than like level 54 missions or whatever. And you're just like, what the fuck? How is there a level 54 mission that is, or whatever the number is, that is more, that is easier than this one is?
Yeah, and I I take your point that that's what it's supposed to be, but I also think it's like not quite right? Like because like I like as Night Fae, I've got pretty strong AOE. I still struggle with those sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Like I just don't think that they just don't play quite right. I'll try again at some point, but like
I,
it's
I
just
feel I feel blessed because Necrolords are just like disgusting at AoE. One of the big things that makes the Necrolord so gross is that we have access to Plaguey, who is, and I've talked about this before,
sure.
who's just like insanely good. He just like, the funny thing is that there's a version of Plaguey for the Kyrian, who I am also doing now. Like I am also doing, uh I have all of the 60s cleared on Baron, and I'm basically done with the uh I'm basically done with the campaign on Gondor, but like being able to see the two different, like the different ways that the two groups, it is so much easier on Necrolords than it is for Bastion, just because like the abilities are different. Bastion has a bunch of healers, and I think healers are kind of the worst of all of these guys because they never put out enough heals to like offset the damage that you're taking in, and I don't really think that they like kind of accurately help your party compared to somebody who just does damage, right? Like obviously the best kind of CC is death.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, the Night Fae healer also doubles the damage of everybody on your team for like 2 rounds. So she's pretty good. Um uh but like yeah. So the funny thing is like something I will do is like if I've got like a lower level mission that's like for anima, right? So like it's like a straight up win trade, right? Like I will like put like one character in like in the back row on the left side, then 3 staff fighters in the front row, and then 1 staff healer in the back, just to heal that person up because they'll come out of the mission with more health than they went into it, and I'll like net up like 50 animas, so it's like yeah, win win. Um,
that's funny. Yeah, I don't use the troops really ever. I basically have 3 going, and it's always full champion parties because I'm mostly trying to get everybody leveled as quickly as possible. And also, I just like don't think that a lot of the, like, I never do the ones for gear. Obviously, like those are bad. So it's really just like the good trade resources, augment runes, anima. It's really kind of it. I don't really do any of the other missions at
yeah,
this
so
point.
so the I've been doing the XP ones too, but like the thing I discovered was that like the trade resources, like the gold missions just give better base XP. So like that's like the thing
Yeah.
to do, and like also like the trade goods are like worth it for like the resale gold on the but like I was like for a while just like spamming all of, like the cheap missions because they were fast, right? I was like I don't care about trade resources, but like the animal ones trade, they're like win win. But they're all like most of them, or
Yeah,
rather,
because they tend to cost 10 anima and give you back more like
yeah,
50 or 60.
yeah.
So
It's been a lot better too since the anime increase, right? Like
yeah, absolutely. The anima increase, like right now, I think there's 3,000 anima up in World Quest, and I'm just like,
yeah.
give me, I want it. It's just like it feels so much better to be like farming anima. I'm honestly like almost running out of things to get at this point because I have maybe 50,000 anima left of things that I really want, which is like some weapon appearances, a couple armor appearances, and that's it. Like I have all the mounts. I have the illusion and stuff like that. Which I mean, 50,000 anima. That's obviously a lot of anima. So, but like considering, if all of the world quests today are 3,000 anima, you get a couple thousand anima out of the raid now. You get like 2 grand out of the raid or whatever. Like it is not hard to break 5 or 10,000 anima a week at this point.
Yeah, no, I like absolutely. I'm a little bit further out, right? Because like you have like I've got like they're only 1,500 piece, but I've got souls to buy. You have something like that? Okay.
Nope.
Um, but yeah, like I've like the weapons are like what 35,000 a piece, so
Hmm.
it's gonna be a little while before I can pull those. Um, yeah, yep, and if it feels like I'm making progress though, right? Which is good.
Yeah, I mean that it is. I don't know. It is also a weird badge of honor, or like, you know what I mean? Like it feels good that I have a set of armor that I don't think other people really have.
Hmm.
Which makes me honestly like really want to use that set just to kind of like to show off in the same way that like if I was a mythic raider, I would want to show off my mythic raider set, right?
Yeah, no.
Um,
So this feels bad because like I got the soul shape from AOTC, but I like the turtle better. And it's like, but I have the special dragon that I should be dunking on the turtle.
Yeah, have
Uh,
you have you seen any of the do you pay any attention to like WoW like news stuff? Have you been
no.
paying attention to any 9.1 stuff? They're changing Torghast on the PTR, which I'm excited about. I've done a couple of runs where I think it's actually kind of tough to do Torghast. Man, yeah, I do not envy the WoW devs on this one because they have kind of simultaneously created two groups. One group who are completionists, right? Like they want a perfect Torghast run to be one where they do everything and it challenges them along the way, right? Like it is a challenge to do every like things scale up as they get more powerful. And then there's the speedrunners who just want to like book it to the end boss and like kill it as fast as possible. The new thing that they're doing for Torghast is there's a rating now. When you exit Torghast, you get between 1 and 5 gems or whatever. And the in order to progress to the next level, to the next like layer, to get to layer 9, 10, 11, and 12, you need to get 4 out of 5 gems on each of the preceding like like on the preceding Torghast floors. In the same way that like in order to get to from layer 1 to layer 2, you had to kill the boss. Now you have to kill the boss, but you have to do it in a certain amount of time, or you have to do it with a certain completionism percentage, right? So if you get all the phylacteries, you get all the anima powers, you do all the bonus events or whatever, you get to the end, that'll get you 4 out of 5. If you do it before, they call it a par time, you will also now get 4 out of 5 gems. And if you do both, if you complete most of it and you beat it before that timer runs out,
Get
you
five.
get 5 stars. Yeah, which I think is cool. I think is neat. There's also an additional progression system which I love, which is it's called the box of many things. Um, the harder layers of Torghast now have additional, they're called torments, right? But they're just like additional problems that you need to like deal with. So it's like, oh, when 5 enemies get close, you take 30% more damage. So or when this happens, then that happens, right? Those kinds of things. And then there are things that you can do to mitigate that and make it easier to run Torghast by like at the end of a run, you get a certain currency. You pour that currency into the box, and now the box says, well, you do X% more damage under Y circumstances, right? So even like so that there's kind of like a progression
Right.
uh in doing Torghast, and Torghast becomes like easier and easier as you go up the thing, which I think is neat. People are mad about it, but I think the WoW community just like honestly fucking hates the
I would
game at
say
this point.
is mad about it is like a thing that like just seems to be a perpetual state of anything in World of Warcraft. Like there's somebody
Yeah,
that's
I
gonna
mean
be mad about it.
the thing that I really hate is like Asmongold, obviously the very famous streamer, posted a twit longer yesterday where he called systems like Torghast, the Maw, Conduit Energy, he called these playtime extenders. Because the only goal of the system is to waste your time so that you give Blizzard more sub money and they can show better engagement metrics, which I hate so much. It is the most bad faith argument I could possibly think of, that like the only reason these mechanics exist is to waste your time to be a bottom line on Bobby Kotick's fucking like spreadsheet. And I understand why. Like I think these people have really whipped themselves into sort of this fervor that the game is entirely ruined by its corporate greed or whatever. But I don't like, how do you make an argument to
I
deal
mean,
with
he is right insofar as like the point of a video game is to waste your time for fun, right? Like that is like
yeah, yeah, I know.
like
It's just like the thing that bothers me about it is just like those things are playtime extenders, but like weekly raid lockouts are not playtime extenders, right? Like the Great Vault is not a playtime extender. Should I be able to loot the Great Vault daily, hourly, right? Like, come
yeah.
on, right?
Also, like think like a playtime extender. Like it's a leisure product, right? Like it's the point here, right? Like like
Oh god.
and like
Yep.
the point is like if it's like I get it, right? There can be things that are just like grindiness for the sake of grindiness. Then you stop playing the game, right? Like I don't know.
I think WoW is in its most grind friendly state at the moment, right? Like there are the few, you have to grind the least now than any time in the history of WoW that I have ever played,
Well, so like
because just like the way that they have structured the mechanics like renown and everything.
I also think it's like hit the right balance, right? Like
Hmm.
like this is part of the reason why like I feel like I've stuck around, right? Like I was like I think this applies post anime increase, like I've said before. Like I think the anime increase maybe could have stood to have come a little bit sooner, but whatever. That's like that's like inches rather than miles, right? Like um
Sure.
but like there's stuff to earn for. It's like things that I want to get. It's also I make satisfying progress when I go to do them, and I don't feel compelled. Like the gating is not that I feel compelled to do it all the time, right? Like you talk about, like you feel compelled to like fill the number to the top.
Yeah.
Um, I don't feel compelled to do that. I don't feel like I'm significantly behind because of it, right? Like I'm not burning myself out in the game, right? Like I think the best comparison I can come back to is like is I came back first time I played WoW was in vanilla. Then I came
Hmm.
back for Pandaria, or at the end of Pandaria before I guess that would have been
Warlords.
Warlords. Yeah. So I was like doing the Pandaria dailies, right? Like and like those felt annoying, right? Because it's like I have to do my dailies limit so that I can do the dailies. Because every day I'm not doing a daily is a day that like I'm not advancing this and I need to do X number of days, right? Whereas here it feels like technically most of that's true, but it's very fuzzy and I don't feel too bad about it, right? Like, like
Yeah, I feel like the problem is WoW needs to simultaneously cater to players like in this instance you, and players in this instance like me, right? Like you don't do the maw, right? But I do the maw. I still do the maw. All of my conduits are maxed. I have a gem slot on all of my gear, most of which is best in slot, and I'm still farming the
but
maw.
but
And honestly, it is just because it's fun. I just enjoy my time in the mod. And so the game simultaneously needs to reward me with power for doing the fun thing, right? Because WoW wants to reward you for
yeah.
doing the fun thing. And it can't reward too much because then it becomes an obligation for you to do a thing that you don't think is fun. I think that is the core tension
Right.
and the hard thing when it comes to WoW.
And that's the thing, right? Like when I was still like farming Finari rep, right? Like I was doing them all every day, right? But once I
Yeah.
hit that, I was like, like I do my weeklies. I do my weeklies mostly because they give me divine spirits for my garden, right? Like so,
Oh, really? I didn't
yeah,
actually
yeah,
know that.
yeah. And actually, I'm probably gonna miss the one tonight, but like it's not a big deal, right? Like it's not the end of
Yeah.
the world. Actually, something that's oddly bad, I think, is that like actually like doing like the bosses give me the green spirits, which I don't really care about. Right, like I've got enough
Interesting.
blue spirits that I can like keep my garden going mostly with blue spirits. Um, so
I
like
have just started the garden, so I don't have any. I don't.
yeah,
I've not seen any spirits yet at this point. But
part of it is that like the garden like the garden sucks at low levels, right? Like there's like nothing super compelling. Like I do it on the chance that you get like the cosmetics, right? Like that's like the reason you're doing it, and otherwise you're just like farming mats, which I guess are like a gold farm, but like you know, it's nice because like, you know, every 3 or 4 days, like it's great because like I can come back every 3 or 4 days, clear out my farm, and I'm good, right? Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
totally passive, right? It's perfect for like the way, like, you know, as much as I want to engage with WoW right now, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I come on raid night maybe once or twice throughout the week to like clean out some anima and like, you know, do some stuff. If I'm feeling really motivated, I'll jump into a BG or maybe I'll try and find a mythic to run. That's actually so. This is the thing that I think is like a potential problem. It's like the mythic community is so far up in mythics that I feel like I can't jump in, right? Like if I really wanted to, and
Interesting.
I don't like, I'd have to like ask you to help me, right? Or like
Yeah.
fight me,
Yeah. For
or
sure.
ask the guild to help me, right? Like I couldn't, like it's like every key seems to be like 10 and up. I bet
Mhm.
you I could like jump in and maybe adapt, but I also feel like I'd feel terrible if I fucked that up, so I'm not going to, right? Like,
Yeah, I think the proper way to do mythics is to walk up the ladder,
yeah,
right? But it is tough because there's just not a lot of ladder right now. I think if I were you, the thing I would do is I would get my own key and I would run it up and see what happens, right?
right, yeah, yeah,
Like just list your key, take who shows up, see what happens, kind of thing. Because like there's just like a lot of little things to understand about mythics that uh that you just get by like running them in those kinds of like non-stressful scenarios, like right, like I bet you put out the damage. I mean, what's your item level right now? It's gonna be
two
like 215, 16 level,
two
something like
12,
that.
214, depending
Okay,
on,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, like you could probably do 10s, 11s, 12s easy, right? Like, but it's just about having the knowledge of how the boss is, how the affixes like interact, all that kind of thing. I think most people are just doing mythics on alts now, right? Like I have a fresh alt who's like 200. And the funny thing is that because I have that mastery, I can take that alt to very high level mythics and do
right,
well just because like I understand the mechanics, like
yeah, no, like, and like you said, like take your own key. I don't have a key, right? Like I have to do like
yeah.
a mythic 0 to generate a key, and like maybe I'll do that at some point, but I'll probably just like if I care enough to do that, I'll wait for 9.1 maybe. Or like if I
Yeah.
really get bored, I really feel like, you know, I really feel like it, I'll like tap the guild or something. Or I won't.
Mm.
And I'll, you know,
Yeah, I think the core thing is that mythics are not built to be pugged. They are built to be done by a group of,
mm,
people in voice chat who can coordinate these things, right? Like it's built to be done by a guild group, if that makes sense.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And you know, right now I'm playing Spellbreak, which I'm having more fun with. And I also like want to finish Death Stranding, which I like, you know,
I know I want to finish Valhalla. I told myself I was going to go back to Assassin's Creed Valhalla and I keep not doing it. Even when I have moments where I'm just like, you know what? I have 3 hours of free time and then I just watch Futurama and play Game Dev Tycoon instead.
no, I definitely feel that. It's like, do I want to invest myself? Like, because the other game I want to play is fucking Disco Elysium with the voice acting,
Yeah.
right? Like, it looks fucking great. I would love to play that, and I probably will at some point. But you know, I could also like, you know, Monarch wants to play around a spell break. I could, you know, go jump into that instead, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's such less of a commitment. But yeah, but, you know, that's life. You have anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here since we're over time?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, if you'd like to tell us what you think about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at dirtsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@dirtsplaygames.com. You can watch this live at twitch.tv/dirtsplaygames. You can rate review us on iTunes and other places where podcasts are found, and on YouTube. I think I forgot to put the episode out before this one, so I'll have to do that export soon. Um, yeah. And I think that's everything I had. But you have anything you want to promote?
I have nothing else that I'm looking to promote.
In that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.